In the quiet corners of the Singh family home, a silent struggle was unfolding, one that had nothing to do with cameras or producers. We see a fleeting image of Sumit's father, Anil, his face etched with a weariness that seems to go beyond simple fatigue. He looks frail, a shadow of the man we once knew. In any normal family, this would be a cause for shared concern, a reason to rally together and offer support. It would be a time for hushed conversations about doctors' visits and gentle inquiries about his well-being. But in the charged atmosphere of the Singh family, it became something else entirely. It became an accusation, a dark suspicion that festered in the shadows, waiting for a moment to strike. And in the silent, superstitious trial, the accused was, as always, Jenny. She was the one on trial for a crime she couldn't comprehend, judged by a law that wasn't written down, a law of energy, auras, and ancient fears. This story is not just about a disapproving mother-in-law anymore. It's about something far more terrifying, a belief so powerful it can turn a loved one into a threat. If you are ready to uncover the chilling truth that has been happening behind closed doors, a truth that producers don't want you to see, then do me a favor, take 1 second to hit that like button and make sure you are subscribed with all notifications turned on. You are not going to want to miss a single detail of the exclusive insider reports we bring you, because the reality of the situation is far darker than you could ever imagine. To truly understand the terrifying accusation now being leveled against Jenny, we must first rewind. We have to peel back the layers of this complicated cross-continental love story and examine the fault lines that were present from the very beginning. This was never just about an age gap. It was never just about cultural differences or the disapproval of a traditional family. From the moment Jenny Slatton entered the orbit of the Singh family, she was perceived not as a person, but as a force of disruption, a foreign element introduced into a carefully balanced ecosystem, threatening to throw everything into chaos. Sahna, Sumit's mother, has always been the gatekeeper of this ecosystem. Her objections were consistently framed around honor, society, and what the neighbors would say. But sources deep within their community, people who have known the Singh family for decades, suggest that her objections ran much deeper, tapping into a primal, almost spiritual fear. In their world, a marriage is not the union of two individuals. It is the merging of two families, two histories, and two energies. An arranged marriage, the bedrock of their tradition, is a carefully calculated process designed to ensure compatibility not just of personalities, but of horoscopes, of family status, and of what we might call spiritual vibrations. It is meant to be a harmonious joining that strengthens the family unit. Sumit's choice to pursue Jenny was a rejection of this entire system. He didn't just choose a different woman, he chose a different world. Jenny represented the unknown, the unpredictable, the West. She was a variable that could not be controlled or accounted for in their traditional calculus of life. Her very presence was a challenge to the order that Sahna had spent her entire life upholding. Think back to the early days, the catfishing, the lies, Sumit's secret first marriage. To a Western audience, this was a story of a man trapped between love and duty, making desperate, often misguided choices. But from Sahna's perspective, this was the first sign of the curse. This was the proof that Jenny's influence was already bringing discord and dishonesty into her son's life, and by extension, into their home. The constant fighting, the tears, the emotional turmoil that defined their journey for years, Sahna didn't see this as a romantic struggle. She saw it as a spiritual sickness. The house, which was once a place of relative peace, became a battleground of stress and anxiety. This, in her mind, was the first symptom of the bad aura Jenny had brought with her. For years, Sahna fought to keep this foreign energy at bay. She resisted the relationship. She refused to give her blessing. She created a wall between her family and this American woman. This wasn't just about stubbornness. Our insider sources describe it as a form of spiritual quarantine. As long as Jenny was not officially and completely integrated, as long as she was just Sumit's girlfriend, the contamination could be contained. The family's core spiritual unit, centered around Sahna and her husband Anil, could remain protected. Anil, throughout this period, was a figure of stoic stability. He was the calm center in the hurricane of his wife's and son's emotions. He was, by all accounts, a healthy and steady man. This is a critical point. In Sahna's memory, the timeline is stark and unforgiving. Before Jenny's official acceptance, Anil was strong. After, he began to fade. The turning point was marriage. When Sumit and Jenny finally tied the knot, it was a seismic event. The astrologer's reluctant blessing, the small temple ceremony, it was the moment the wall was breached. Jenny was no longer an outsider orbiting the family. She was now, legally and spiritually, a part of it. She was a Singh. And for Sahna, this was the moment the gates were opened and the Trojan horse was wheeled inside. The acceptance that followed was, according to our sources, a painful, reluctant surrender. Sahna began to tolerate Jenny's presence, even attempting to teach her things, to mold her into an Indian daughter-in-law. But this was not a change of heart. It was a desperate attempt to neutralize a threat that was now living under her roof. If she could make Jenny more like them, perhaps she could change her energy, cleanse her aura, and protect the family from the inside. It was a failed experiment. Jenny, for all her efforts, remained fundamentally American. Her ways were different. Her energy was different. Her very essence was alien to Sahna. And it was during this period of forced integration that the sickness truly began to manifest in Sahna's eyes. It started with small things. Anil, who had always had a robust appetite, began to pick at his food. He complained of being tired, of aches and pains he'd never had before. A persistent cough began to settle in his chest. To a doctor, these are the common ailments of a man aging. To a concerned family member, they are reasons to seek medical advice. But to a mind steeped in superstition and already convinced of a foreign threat, these symptoms were not medical. They were evidence. They were the physical manifestation of the dark cloud Jenny had brought into their home. Each cough, each sleepless night, was another piece of proof that Sahna's deepest fears were coming true. The curse was real, and it was attacking the heart of her family, her husband. This brings us to the core of our investigation, a piece of evidence so raw and revealing that it changes the entire narrative. Through a source who has chosen to remain anonymous for their own safety and protection from community backlash, we have obtained access to a secretly recorded conversation. The conversation is between Sahna and a trusted neighbor, a woman she has known for over 30 years. It took place on a quiet afternoon in the supposed privacy of the neighbor's courtyard, a place where Sahna believed she could unburden her soul without judgment. The audio is not perfect. You can hear the distant sound of street vendors and the cawing of crows. But Sahna's voice is chillingly clear, a mixture of anguish, fear, and cold, hard certainty. "I don't know what to do anymore, Reena," Sahna begins, her voice trembling slightly. "He's not getting better. The doctors give him pills, they say it's just his age, but I know better. I know what this is." The neighbor, Reena, murmurs something sympathetic, inaudible in the recording. Sahna's voice hardens. "It started when she was fully accepted, when Sumit forced his father to say, 'She is our daughter-in-law.' That was the day. I felt it. A coldness in the house. Since that woman was allowed to call this her home, a shadow fell over Anil. He was never like this. Never. He had the strength of two men. He would work in the shop all day, come home, and still have energy to play with the neighborhood children." She pauses, and you can hear her take a ragged breath. Now he sits in his chair and stares. He barely speaks. He coughs all night. The doctor says it is his lungs. I say it is his spirit. It is being drained. Her energy is not right for this house. It is a heavy, dark energy. It smothers everything. She brought this sickness to our house. I tell Sumit, he doesn't listen. He is blinded. He says, "Mummy, you are being dramatic." He doesn't see what I see. The neighbor asks a question, likely about Jenny's behavior. "She tries," Sahna spits, the word tries dripping with contempt. "She tries to cook. She puts her hands on our food, in our kitchen. The day she made that American pasta with all the cheese that night, Anil was up all night with a pain in his stomach. She touches him, she tries to hand him his tea, and I have to step in. I have to take it from her hand and give it to him myself. I am trying to protect him. Her touch itself feels wrong. It is not the touch of a daughter. It is the touch of a stranger. An outsider. She has brought a dark cloud over this house. He was never sick before her." The finality in her voice is absolute. This is not a suspicion. It is a diagnosis. In this private, unguarded moment, Sahna lays out the entire case. Jenny is not just a difficult daughter-in-law. She is a vector of disease. She is not just culturally different. She is spiritually toxic. The conversation continues, with Sahna recounting every minor ailment Anil has suffered and connecting each one to a specific interaction with Jenny. The time Anil felt dizzy, it was the afternoon after Jenny had a loud, emotional phone call with her daughter in America. The time he lost his appetite for a week, It followed a disagreement Sumit and Jenny had over money. To Sahna, the pattern is undeniable. Jenny's presence creates stress. Stress creates negative energy, and that negative energy is physically attacking Anil. She is literally accusing her daughter-in-law of being a curse that is slowly killing her husband. To understand how a seemingly rational woman like Sahna can arrive at such a terrifying conclusion, we must step outside the Western framework of understanding. We consulted with Dr. Anjali Sharma, a socio-cultural anthropologist who specializes in traditional belief systems in northern India. What she explained is that Sahna's fears, while shocking to us, are rooted in ancient, powerful, and deeply ingrained cultural concepts. This is not a personal delusion. This is the weaponization of a widely held superstition. Dr. Sharma explains, what you are describing is a classic, albeit extreme, manifestation of the belief in Nazar, or the evil eye. But it's more complex than that. We often think of Nazar as a curse cast by an enemy, someone who is jealous. However, Nazar can also be unintentional. It is believed that a person with a powerful or turbulent aura, or someone who is fundamentally other, can disrupt the spiritual balance of a home, leading to misfortune, financial loss, and most commonly, illness. This is often referred to as Buri Nazar, the bad gaze or bad influence. According to Dr. Sharma, in many traditional households, the health and prosperity of the family are seen as being directly tied to the spiritual harmony within the home. The matriarch, in this case Sahna, often sees herself as the guardian of this harmony. Anything that disrupts it is a threat. Jenny, Dr. Sharma continues, represents a massive disruption on multiple levels. She is foreign, she is of a different generation, a different religion, a different race. She does not share the same cultural programming. In a belief system that prizes conformity and predictability as a way of maintaining spiritual safety, Jenny is the ultimate wild card. Sahna is not just seeing a woman who doesn't fit in. She is seeing a source of chaotic energy that is making her family vulnerable. When Anil, the patriarch, the foundation of the family, begins to fall ill, Sahna's mind immediately seeks a cause that makes sense within her worldview. It is far more comforting for her to believe that his illness is caused by a tangible external threat, Jenny, than to accept the random, uncontrollable reality of aging and sickness. This is the key. Sahna has weaponized this superstition. She has taken a vague, esoteric belief and focused it like a laser beam on one person. It allows her to make sense of a world that is spinning out of her control. Her son has married a woman she disapproves of. Her husband is getting older and more frail. These are two terrifying, painful realities. By linking them, she creates a narrative that gives her a sense of agency. She can't fight old age, she can't fight death, but she can fight Jenny. She can identify the curse and try to contain it. In her mind, she is not a villainous mother-in-law tormenting an innocent woman. She is a protector, a spiritual warrior fighting a tangible evil that has invaded her home and is threatening her husband's life. This elevates her disapproval from a simple family squabble to a righteous crusade. Jenny is no longer just the wrong wife for her son. She is a walking, breathing hex, a source of poison that must be neutralized. This belief system, this terrifying diagnosis, has now moved from private whispers to concrete action. The judgment has been passed, and the sentence is total isolation. Jenny is being systematically and completely cut off from any and all matters related to Anil's health. This is not the passive-aggressive exclusion we have seen in the past. This is a deliberate, methodical quarantine based on the conviction that she is a contaminant. Our sources describe a chilling new reality in the Singh household. When Anil has a bad day, when his cough is worse or he feels particularly weak, Jenny is instructed, usually by Sumit acting as his mother's mouthpiece, to keep her distance. "Mommy thinks it's better if you stay in our room today," he might say. "Dad needs to rest, and she doesn't want him disturbed." The word disturbed is a code. It doesn't mean noise or activity, it means proximity to Jenny's bad aura. The kitchen, a place Jenny has struggled to find her footing in, has now become a fortress. Sahna watches her like a hawk. If Jenny prepares a meal, Sahna will often quietly discard it later and remake it herself, especially if it's for Anil. She cannot risk him ingesting food that has been touched by Jenny's negative energy. She has been seen performing small cleansing rituals, flicking water from the Ganges in the corners of the kitchen after Jenny has been in there, or discreetly waving a handful of dried chilies and salt over the stove to ward off the evil eye. These are not symbolic gestures. For Sahna, they are as vital as taking medicine. The most damning evidence of this quarantine is the handling of medical appointments. When Anil needs to see a doctor, it is always Sana and Sumit who take him. Jenny is explicitly told to stay home. The excuse given is always practical. It will be too crowded, or you need to stay here and look after the house. But the real reason is understood by everyone, even if it is never spoken aloud. They cannot risk bringing the source of the curse into the sterile, healing environment of a doctor's office. It would be like bringing a vial of poison to an antidote dispensary. Jenny's role is relegated to that of a distant, helpless observer. She is allowed to ask Sumit how the appointment went, but she is not part of the conversation, not part of the caregiving team. She is treated like a walking source of bad luck, a jinx that must be kept as far away from the patient as possible. Imagine the psychological torment of this situation for Jenny. She is a woman who, for all her faults, appears to genuinely care for Sumit, and by extension, his family. She sees his father, a man who has shown her more kindness than his mother, suffering. Her natural instinct would be to help, to comfort, to care for him. She wants to bring him a cup of tea, to sit with him, to fluff his pillow, to offer a kind word. But every time she tries, she is met with a wall of resistance. She is blocked by Sahna, redirected by Sumit, and looked at with an expression of fear and suspicion. She is being blamed for something she cannot see, fighting an accusation that is not based in logic or reason. She is not just an outsider in a foreign land anymore. She has been branded as a danger, a threat, a curse on the family she fought so long and so hard to join. This has solidified her status in the most brutal way imaginable. She is not family. Family rallies together in times of sickness. The family cares for its own. By being designated as the cause of the sickness, she has been permanently and irrevocably cast out from that sacred circle. Her very presence is seen as an act of aggression against Anil's health. The emotional toll of this is immense. How do you live in a house where your very breath is considered a threat? Where your touch is seen as a poison? Jenny is trapped in a waking nightmare, living with an accuser who genuinely believes she is a harbinger of death, and a husband who is too weak or too indoctrinated to defend her against an invisible enemy. The situation has moved beyond simple family drama into the realm of psychological and spiritual warfare, with Jenny as the unwitting and undeserving target. The Singh house is no longer just a home. It has become a prison. And for Sahna, Jenny is not a daughter-in-law. She is the sickness that walks its halls. The quarantine is not just physical. It is becoming spiritual and absolute. We have learned from our sources that Sahna has now begun to consult more frequently with the family's pandit, or priest. These are not the regular scheduled visits for holidays or festivals. These are urgent, fearful consultations. She is not seeking blessings for prosperity or general well-being. She is seeking remedies. She is describing Anil's symptoms to the priest, not in medical terms, but in spiritual ones. She speaks of a heaviness in the home, of a draining of life force. And she directly links this to the presence of the American daughter-in-law. She is seeking specific pujas, specific prayers and rituals designed to counteract powerful negative energy and buri nazar. She is in essence trying to find a way to spiritually exorcise Jenny's influence from her home and from her husband's body. Think of the implications. Sahna is now bringing the full weight of her religious and spiritual tradition to bear against Jenny. This is no longer one woman's paranoid suspicion. She is seeking and receiving validation from a figure of spiritual authority. The pandit, hearing a distressed woman's description of her husband's decline and her fears about a disruptive foreign element, is likely to prescribe traditional remedies. These can range from chanting specific mantras a certain number of times a day, to placing blessed objects or yantras in Anil's room, to performing complex fire ceremonies or havans to purify the house. Each of these rituals serves to reinforce Sahna's belief and further isolate Jenny. When Sahna is seen chanting in a corner, clutching her prayer beads and staring intently at Jenny, it's not just a prayer. It's an act of spiritual warfare. When a new symbol is painted by the doorway or a string of chilies and lemons is hung over Anil's bed, it is a ward placed specifically against the perceived negative energy emanating from Jenny. Jenny is forced to watch as the entire spiritual architecture of the home is reconfigured to protect the family from her. This has created an almost unbearable tension within the home. Sumit is caught in the middle of a war between science and superstition, love and duty. On one hand, he accompanies his father to modern doctors who speak of blood pressure and respiratory function. On the other hand, he comes home to a mother who speaks of auras and curses, and his attempts to bridge this gap are failing. He tries to placate his mother by participating in the rituals, by enforcing the quarantine on Jenny, telling himself it's just to keep the peace. He tells Jenny to be patient, that his mother is just old-fashioned and worried. But in doing so, he is validating the premise of the accusation. By asking Jenny to stay away from Anil for Mummy's sake, he is tacitly agreeing that her presence is a problem. He is not defending her against the accusation. He is helping to manage the curse. This is a betrayal that cuts Jenny deeper than any overt act of aggression from Sahna. Her own husband is complicit in her branding as a contaminant. We have reports of hushed, frantic arguments between Sumit and Jenny late at night. Jenny in tears asking, "Don't you see what she's doing? She thinks I'm making him sick. You have to say something." And Sumit, exhausted and defeated, responding with, "What can I say? That her beliefs are stupid? She's my mother. She is scared. Just be patient. He will get better, and she will see." But Jenny understands the flaw in this logic. If Anil's health worsens, Sahna's belief will only be strengthened. If, God forbid, the worst should happen, Sahna will have no doubt in her mind who is to blame. Jenny will be branded not just as the unwanted wife, but as the woman who killed Sumit's father with her dark energy. This fear is now manifesting in Jenny's own behavior. Once open and expressive, she has become withdrawn and timid within the walls of the Singh home. She walks on eggshells, terrified of doing anything that could be misinterpreted as an attack. If she laughs too loudly, she worries it will be seen as her chaotic energy disturbing the peace. If she feels a moment of sadness or frustration, she hides it, lest her negative emotions be blamed for a downturn in Anil's health. She is policing her own existence, trying to make her aura as small and invisible as possible. She avoids Anil, not because she wants to, but because she has been conditioned to believe her proximity is harmful. She sees him across the room, looking frail, and a wall of fear and superstition prevents her from approaching. She is living in a constant state of anticipatory guilt, terrified that the next cough, the next stumble, the next complaint of pain from Anil will be laid at her feet. The call to action that ends the narrative asks a profound question. How do you fight an accusation that isn't based in reality? Jenny is facing an enemy she cannot reason with, a logic she cannot penetrate. You cannot present evidence against a feeling. You cannot use facts to disprove a superstition. Sahna's belief is a self-sealing loop. Any attempt by Jenny to defend herself, to get angry, to cry, is simply more proof of her disruptive, negative energy. Her kindness is seen as a trick. Her concern is seen as a facade. Her very existence is the only evidence Sahna needs. Jenny is in an impossible position, trapped in a web of ancient beliefs that have been twisted into a personal vendetta. She is being judged by a court of one, where the judge is also the prosecutor and the jury, and the evidence is written in the language of curses and shadows. This is not just a family dispute anymore. It is a terrifying look at how deep superstition can run, and how it can be used to isolate, condemn, and psychologically destroy a person. The spiritual quarantine of Jenny Slatin was now in full effect, but Sahna knew that containing the threat was not enough. The poison, she believed, had already seeped into the foundations of the house and into the very blood of her husband. To truly save her family, she had to go on the offensive. She had to build an army. Her first and most crucial target for recruitment was her other son, Amit, and his wife. Our sources, who include a cousin who has witnessed the family's terrifying transformation, describe a calculated campaign of fear and persuasion waged by Sahna. She began to call Amit daily, her conversations a masterclass in manipulation. She would not begin with wild accusations. Instead, she would start with a detailed, sorrowful report of Anil's health. "Your father couldn't keep his food down again last night," she would say, her voice a fragile whisper. "He was coughing for 3 hours. I had to hold him up just so he could breathe. The doctors, they don't know. They just give him more pills." She would let the silence hang in the air, allowing Amit's concern for his father to build. Only then would she plant the seed of superstition. "It's the atmosphere in this house, Beta. It has changed. There is a heaviness here now, a sadness that wasn't here before." She would then connect this vague heaviness to Jenny. She had a fight with Sumit again. Her voice was so loud, so full of anger. "And right after your father had to lie down. He said his head was spinning. The energy is too much for him." Amit, a modern man, was initially skeptical. He would try to reason with his mother, suggesting stress was the likely culprit. But Sahna was relentless. She would pivot, appealing to his sense of duty and tradition. "You may not believe in these things, Amit, but your father does. Your ancestors did. You cannot ignore the signs. Do you not see the timeline? Your father was a rock, and now he is sand slipping through my fingers, And it all started when she was allowed to cross our threshold as a wife. She was framing the argument not as fact versus fiction, but as tradition versus a dangerous foreign influence. To deny her theory was to deny their heritage, to side with the outsider against their ailing father. His wife, our sources say, was an easier convert. As a more traditional daughter-in-law herself, she already viewed Jenny with a degree of suspicion. She saw Jenny's inability to assimilate as a failure, a sign of disrespect. When Sahna spoke to her, she found a much more receptive audience. She would frame Jenny's actions not just as careless, but as intentionally malevolent. She tried to give your father-in-law that American tea with milk and ice, Sahna would confide. She knows it upsets his stomach. It's as if she doesn't care, or worse, as if she wants him to be uncomfortable. Every cultural misstep Jenny made was reframed as a deliberate act of sabotage, a small pinprick of negative energy designed to weaken Anil. The strategy worked. Soon, the family's united front against Jenny was solidified. When Amit and his family would visit, the change was palpable. They would greet Jenny with a coolness that bordered on hostility. They would direct all their conversation to Sahna and Anil, effectively rendering Jenny invisible. They would bring food for Anil, pointedly handing it directly to Sahna with the instruction, "This is for Papa G. It's made the traditional way with pure ingredients." The subtext was clear. Unlike the food in this house, which has been contaminated by foreign hands, they became Sahna's enforcers, their suspicious glances and cold shoulders reinforcing the narrative that Jenny was the source of all the family's woes. Jenny was no longer just fighting her mother-in-law. She was fighting the entire Singh clan. And then came the omen, the irrefutable sign that convinced Sahna and everyone she had indoctrinated that her fears were not just justified, but prophetically true. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon. Anil was having a relatively good day. He was sitting in his favorite armchair in the living room, listening to old songs on the radio. Jenny, seeing him looking a bit more cheerful, felt a flicker of hope. She decided to do something nice, something that couldn't possibly be misinterpreted. She went to the market and bought a bouquet of marigolds, his favorite flowers. They were a vibrant, sunny orange, and she thought they would brighten up the room and maybe lift his spirits even more. She returned to the house, holding the flowers. As she stepped into the living room, she said, "Anilji, look what I brought for you." She smiled, a genuine, hopeful smile. At that exact moment, a large frame photograph hanging on the wall directly behind Anil's chair crashed to the floor. The sound of shattering glass was like a gunshot in the quiet room. Everyone froze. The photograph was a treasured one, a black and white portrait of Anil as a young man in his 20s, handsome, strong, and full of life. It had hung in that same spot for over 40 years. Now it lay on the floor, the glass spiderwebbed into 1,000 pieces, a jagged crack running directly across the face of the young Anil. Sahna, who had been coming from the kitchen, stopped dead in her tracks, her eyes widened in horror. She didn't look at the photo. She looked at Jenny, standing there frozen, still holding the bright orange marigolds. Then she looked at the shattered glass, then back at Jenny. The connection in her mind was instantaneous and absolute. The flowers, a symbol of life and celebration in Jenny's culture, were seen by Sahna as a funereal offering. Jenny's act of bringing these death flowers into the room at the precise moment the symbol of Anil's youthful vitality was destroyed was to Sahna a sign from the gods themselves. It was the universe confirming her deepest fears. This woman was a harbinger of death. The aftermath was terrifying. Sahna let out a small strangled cry. She rushed forward, not to the photo, but to Anil, shielding him with her body as if Jenny had just thrown a physical weapon. "Get her out," she whispered, her voice shaking with a mixture of rage and terror. "Get her away from him." Sumit, who had come running at the sound of the crash, was stunned. He saw the shattered photo, he saw his mother's panicked face, and he saw Jenny, pale and trembling, the flowers looking obscene and out of place in her hands. The logic of the situation was clear. An old nail had probably given way, but the emotional, superstitious power of the moment was overwhelming. Sahna began to wail, a low, keening sound. "She did this. Her evil eye is too strong. It attacks everything good in this house. It even attacks his memory," she screamed, pointing a trembling finger at Jenny. Jenny tried to speak, to explain. "No, the nail must have, I just bought flowers." But her words were drowned out. Sahna, in a fit of spiritual panic, grabbed a broom and began sweeping the glass, not carefully, but frantically, as if she were sweeping away a physical manifestation of Jenny's curse. She was muttering prayers under her breath, her eyes darting towards Jenny as if expecting lightning to strike. The beautiful sunny marigolds were snatched from Jenny's hand by Sumit, who looked at them as if they were venomous snakes before quickly taking them outside and throwing them in the trash. The incident of the falling photograph became family legend overnight. It was the proof. It was the moment Sahna's private theory became public, an indisputable fact in the eyes of her family. After that day, the quarantine was no longer enough. The house, they believed, needed to be cleansed. The psychological pressure on Sumit, already immense, now reached a breaking point. He was living in a pressure cooker of his mother's escalating fear and his wife's growing despair. He loved Jenny, but he was also a product of his culture, a culture where the word of a mother is paramount, and where the echoes of superstition are never truly silent. The incident with the photograph had shaken him. He didn't want to believe it, but the timing was undeniably eerie. His mother's constant whispers, her tears, her declarations that he was letting this woman kill his father, began to wear him down, eroding his defenses. The breaking point came, not in a loud, dramatic explosion, but in a quiet, soul-crushing conversation. A few nights after the photograph incident, Jenny, unable to bear the suffocating silence and accusatory stares any longer, decided to confront Sumit. She found him sitting alone on their small balcony, staring out into the night. "Sumit, we have to talk," she began, her voice gentle but firm. "This has gone too far. Your mother is not just being difficult anymore. She truly believes I am a curse. The way she looks at me, it's like she expects me to sprout horns. And you let her. You let her say these things. You let your family treat me like I'm a disease. You need to defend me. You are my husband." Sumit didn't look at her. He continued to stare into the darkness. For a long moment, he said nothing. When he finally spoke, his voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "Defend you from what, Jenny? From a feeling? From what my mother believes in her heart? How do I fight that?" "You fight it with the truth!" Jenny's voice rose with desperation. "You tell her it's ridiculous. You tell her that I love you and I care about your father. You tell her that a picture falling off the wall is just a picture falling off the wall." Sumit finally turned to face her, and his eyes were filled not with love or support, but with a deep, weary resentment. "And you don't think I've tried? I talk to her until I'm blue in the face, but then she points. She points at my father, sleeping in his chair, unable to catch his breath. And she asks me, was he like this before her? And what can I say, Jenny? What can I say? No, he wasn't." Jenny recoiled as if he had slapped her. "So you believe it too?" she whispered, horrified. "No, I don't know what I believe anymore," he finally exploded, his voice cracking with the strain of it all. "But what I do know is that this house was peaceful before you were fully in it. Yes, we had problems, but it was not like this. This constant darkness, this fear my mother is terrified. And maybe if you just tried harder, this wouldn't be happening." "Tried harder?" Jenny was incredulous. "Tried harder at what? How can I try harder to not have a bad aura? What do you want me to do?" "I don't know," Sumit yelled, running his hands through his hair in frustration. "Be quieter. Be more like her. Don't bring flowers. Don't have loud phone calls. Don't cook strange food. Don't do anything that makes her notice you. Just stop giving her reasons. Can't you see you're making it worse? Every time you try to be yourself, you poke the bear. For my father's sake, for my sake, can you just try to be invisible for a while?" The word invisible hung in the air between them, a final, devastating judgment. He wasn't asking her to be a better wife or a more understanding daughter-in-law. He was asking her to cease to exist. He was admitting defeat. He had chosen his side. In that moment, he was not her husband, her partner, her defender. He was his mother's son. He was another guard in the prison of her superstition. For Jenny, this was a betrayal more profound than any lie he had ever told her. Sahna had finally won. She had not only turned the family against Jenny, she had managed to poison the one relationship that was supposed to be her sanctuary. Jenny stood there on the balcony, completely and utterly alone, the cold night air a reflection of the chilling emptiness that had just opened up inside her. With Sumit's resistance broken and the entire family convinced they were under spiritual attack, Sahna made her next move. The house had to be purified. She consulted the family pandit, who confirmed her worst fears. The falling of the ancestral photograph, he agreed, was a terrible omen. The confluence of events, the foreign daughter-in-law, the patriarch's illness, the shattering of the past, all pointed to a powerful dosha, or fault in the home's spiritual energy. A simple prayer would not be enough. A major cleansing ceremony, a Shuddhikaran was required to drive out the negative influence and restore spiritual balance. Preparations began immediately, and the entire process was designed to be the ultimate act of exclusion. Jenny was not told what was happening. She simply saw Sahna and Sumit's sister-in-law cleaning the house with a frantic energy, scrubbing floors with salt water and hanging mango leaves over the doorways. Then, the pandit arrived, along with two assistants, carrying bags of religious paraphernalia, wood for the sacred fire, ghee, grains, herbs, and powders. A small square brick fireplace, the Havan Kund, was constructed in the center of the living room. It was only then that Sumit, his face grim and his eyes refusing to meet hers, told Jenny what was happening. "The pandit is here to do a puja for the house," he said tersely. "For Dad's health. It's very important. You need to stay in our room until it is over." The pandit said only family members who are pure of intention should be present. The euphemism was as sharp as a knife. Pure of intention. He was telling her she was the impurity that needed to be cleansed. She was the reason for the ceremony. "You're locking me in our room?" she asked, her voice hollow with disbelief. "Don't be dramatic, Jenny," he snapped, unable to bear the shame of what he was doing. "It's just for a few hours. Just stay here. Watch a movie. It's better for everyone this way. It will make Mummy happy." She was escorted to her room like a prisoner. The door was closed, and from inside, she could hear the ceremony begin. The sound of chanting, the low monotonous drone of the pandit reciting Sanskrit verses, filled the house. She could smell the smoke from the sacred fire, a thick, acrid scent of burning wood, ghee, and herbs seeping under her door. It felt like it was suffocating her. She was trapped, a pariah in her own home, forced to listen to the sounds of her family praying for protection from her. Our source, the cousin, was present for the ceremony and described the chilling scene. The family, including Amit and his wife, sat in a circle around the fire. The pandit guided them, instructing them to throw offerings of grain and ghee into the flames at specific moments, chanting Swaha with each offering. He spoke of dark energies and foreign influences that had attached themselves to the house, causing sickness and discord. He never mentioned Jenny by name, but everyone knew who he was talking about. Sahna sat closest to the fire, her eyes closed in fervent prayer, rocking back and forth. At one point, the pandit gave her a brass pot of sanctified water and instructed her to sprinkle it in every corner of the house to purify it. She walked from room to room, flicking the holy water with a mango leaf, her lips moving in a silent mantra. When she reached the closed door of Jenny's bedroom, she hesitated for a moment. Then, with a look of grim determination, she flicked an extra-large amount of water directly onto the door, as if trying to contain the evil within. The ceremony lasted for over 3 hours. For Jenny, locked inside, it was an eternity of psychological torture. Every chant felt like an accusation. Every waft of smoke felt like an attempt to erase her. She was not just being excluded from a family event. She was the subject of a spiritual exorcism. They were trying to smoke her out, to pray her away, to cleanse the very air she breathed. When the ceremony was finally over and the chanting stopped, there was an eerie silence. After a long while, Sumit quietly opened the door. "It's done," he said. The house felt different. The air was thick with residual smoke, but there was also a palpable sense of calm, the calm of a family that believed it had faced its demon and won. Jenny walked out of the room into this new, purified atmosphere, and she felt more alien, more monstrous than ever before. She was a ghost in their cleansed home, the one stain they couldn't quite scrub out. The looks she received were not of hatred, but of a wary, fearful pity. The ceremony was over, but her trial had just entered its most terrifying phase. She was now, officially and spiritually, the witch of the Singh family. In the aftermath of the purification ceremony, Jenny's existence within the Singh household devolved into a kind of living purgatory. The overt hostility was replaced by something far more corrosive, a meticulous and soul-destroying campaign of erasure. Sahna, emboldened by the pandit's validation and the family's compliance, now acted with the calm certainty of a doctor administering a cure. She treated Jenny not as a person, but as a chronic condition that needed to be managed. This management took the form of countless small, daily rituals of exclusion, each one designed to minimize Jenny's spiritual footprint in the house. For instance, Jenny's laundry was now done separately, in a different bucket, as if her clothes carried a contagion that could infect the family's garments. When setting the table for meals, there would be a glass for everyone, but Jenny's would often be forgotten, forcing her to get her own. Sahna began leaving small bowls of rock salt in the corners of rooms Jenny frequented, an ancient method believed to absorb negative energy. Jenny would find them under her side of the bed, on the windowsill in their room, and by the chair she sometimes sat in. Each small white mound was a silent testament to her perceived toxicity. Jenny, desperate to fight back, to assert her own reality, tried a new tactic. If she couldn't beat them with logic, perhaps she could join them in their world. She decided to learn about Hinduism, to show them she could be spiritual, that she could have a good aura. She bought books, watched videos, and began trying to participate. She would attempt to join Sahna for her morning prayers. The first time she did this, she entered the family's small prayer room, the puja gar, and stood respectfully behind her mother-in-law. Sahna, sensing her presence, stiffened. She finished her prayers with hurried, clipped chants, then turned to Jenny, her eyes cold. "This is a sacred space," she said, her voice low and even. "It is for the family. Your energy is not welcome here." She then proceeded to meticulously re-purify the room, lighting extra incense and ringing a small brass bell in every corner to drive out the contamination of Jenny's presence. Defeated but not yet broken, Jenny tried another approach. She decided to make a direct appeal to the one person who had occasionally shown her kindness, Anil. She waited for a rare moment when he was alone. Sitting on the veranda, she approached him cautiously, her heart pounding. "Anilji," she began, her voice soft. "I need to ask you something. Do you believe I am the reason you are sick?" Anil looked up at her, his face a mask of weariness. He seemed smaller, more fragile than ever. He looked at her for a long moment, and his eyes held not malice, but a deep, profound sadness. He opened his mouth to speak, but before he could utter a word, Sahna appeared in the doorway like a wraith. "What are you doing?" she demanded, her voice sharp as glass. "Leave him alone. Can't you see he needs his rest? You are tiring him out with your questions." She swooped in, placing herself between Jenny and her husband, a human shield against Jenny's toxic influence. She took Anil by the arm. "Come, Anil, it's time for your medicine." As she led him away, she gave Jenny a look of pure, unadulterated triumph. She had cut off every possible avenue of appeal. There was no one left for Jenny to turn to. This final, thwarted attempt to connect with Anil was the moment Jenny's spirit truly began to break. The psychological toll of living as a suspected curse was becoming unbearable. We have learned from a close friend of hers in America, with whom she still communicates in secret, that her calls have become increasingly desperate. In one recent tearful conversation, she reportedly said, "I don't know who I am anymore. They look at me, and I can feel their fear. I start to wonder, am I crazy, or are they? I walk into a room, and my own husband flinches. I started to believe it myself. Maybe I am bad luck. Maybe I am the problem. I feel like I'm disappearing, like they are slowly erasing every part of me that isn't what they fear." The ultimate unspoken verdict was delivered not with a shout, but with a quiet, devastating medical event. One evening, Anil's breathing became severely labored. He was wheezing, clutching his chest, his face pale. Panic erupted in the house. Sumit called for an ambulance. In the chaos of the moment, Jenny, acting on pure human instinct, rushed to Anil's side. She grabbed his hand, trying to comfort him, saying, "It's okay, Anilji, help is coming. Just breathe." For a fleeting second, he squeezed her hand back. But then Sahna saw. She let out a scream that was animalistic in its fury and grief. "Get your hands off him!" she shrieked, shoving Jenny away with a strength born of pure terror. "You did this! This is your fault!" The paramedics arrived and stabilized Anil before taking him to the hospital. Sahna and Sumit went with him. Jenny was left behind, standing alone in the silent, empty living room, Sahna's accusation echoing in the air. The timing was, from a superstitious point of view, utterly damning. The severe attack had happened at the very moment of Jenny's touch. For Sahna, this was the final, incontrovertible proof. Jenny's touch, her very essence, was poison. Anil recovered from the immediate crisis, but he was required to stay in the hospital for several days for observation. Jenny was forbidden from visiting. Sumit, his face a stony mask of grief and blame, told her, "The doctor said he needs to be in a calm environment. You being there would be too much for my mother to handle." Jenny was now completely severed from the family's crisis. She was left to pace the floors of the silent, purified house, a house that now felt more like a tomb than a home. Her only updates came from court. infrequent text messages from Sumit. The day Anil was discharged, Jenny prepared to welcome him home. She cleaned their room, hoping for a fresh start. But when the car pulled up, only Sahna and Sumit helped Anil out. He looked exhausted, but as he walked towards the door, he saw Jenny standing there. A flicker of something, fear, confusion, maybe even pity, crossed his face before Sahna quickly guided him past, shielding his eyes from the sight of her as if she were a solar eclipse. He was taken directly to his room, and the door was shut. The message was clear. The quarantine was no longer just for bad days, it was permanent. She was a walking catastrophe, a perpetual threat that had to be kept at a distance at all times. Sahna had won. She had successfully identified, isolated, and neutralized the curse. Jenny was no longer a daughter-in-law. She was not even a person. She was a sealed-off contamination zone, a ghost haunting the edges of a family that now looked right through her, their eyes filled with a terrifying, unshakable certainty. The sickness curse had finally and fully claimed its victim. But the victim wasn't Anil. It was Jenny.